Hey, Lee, it's good to see you up in Oregon.
Okay, everybody, this is the DVMUG meeting for Wednesday, July 15th.
Yeah.
And we are recording. Go ahead, Rick.
So it's time for Q&A at DVMUG, also known as Stump the Chumps. Those of you who've been looking at the pre-meeting stuff, you can see that we succeeded so far. And apparently there was a goof up in the link to get into the meeting, but I'm glad to see that you're all here. So what we normally do is ask for questions and answers, and I think we'll just throw the floor open. If you have a question, what I'd suggest you do is to raise your hand, and I'll recognize you. Otherwise, we get a cacophony, just Tower of Babel if everybody's talking at once. So anybody got any questions? I can see Suzanne down in Cuenca, Ecuador, with her earphones on. Welcome. Bienvenidos, señora. ¿Cómo está usted? We're talking to you, Suzanne. There she is. Okay. That's good. You must have good broadband down in Ecuador to be coming through so well. Okay, so anybody had any problems this week or questions that they wanted to ask? I know Marjorie wanted to get the BBS installed on her MacBook Pro. Did you succeed, Marjorie? In order to talk, just touch the space bar.
No, I didn't try.
Oh, okay. It's pretty simple. Just go to the webpage, dvmug.org, click on BBS, and the software and settings file are all there, and carefully follow the directions for installing, and you'll be all set.
I'm
Well, I
pretty
don't
sure.
remember my password.
I'm pretty sure she already has it installed. We've worked on her computer for a while.
On her new MacBook Pro, John.
You didn't migrate your data?
No.
It should have migrated over. I migrated it for her, but apparently she didn't find it or doesn't see it or it didn't make the trip, one or the other.
If you don't know your password, you have to send me or Ann what you want for a new one.
You may want to also look in your applications folder if it may be there already, and you just have to drag it to your dock.
Okay, I'm looking.
Okay, well, just you can open your applications and just type in FIR and it'll take you right there if you've got it.
FIR?
For first class.
First class, yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, well, you can go to the website and download it and install it. And then you can ask John by email to give you a new password. You can use that temporarily and then you can change it again to something that you don't want us to know. Okay? So
I'll email him sometime, but not tonight.
yeah, right. No, tonight would not be.
Bill has his hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Bill has his hand up.
Hi, Bill. I see you down at the bottom of my screen. What can I help you with? Tap your space bar.
No, don't tap it, press and hold.
I mean, hold it. You still show as being muted, Bill.
You press on the space
There
bar,
you
and
go.
go down.
I found the mute button. Okay. I just saw there's a new Catalina update today. Can you elaborate?
I just saw it this afternoon. There's new iOS, TV, the whole shebang got point upgrades today. I haven't even a chance to look at it.
I haven't seen it. This is the first I've heard of it. So
It was this afternoon.
You got me. I don't know anything about it. Have you read anything about it? What it's doing or anything? Yeah,
Tidbits. I saw tidbits on Twitter. I saw tidbits. So they have a summary of it at tidbits.com.
I saw it right before starting. So I thought I'd ask the experts.
Yeah, no, it's so new. I haven't seen it. I haven't been online all afternoon. I've been preparing dinner and stuff like that, so I've been busy.
If you have a new
Twitter's having
BMW,
major
you can use
problems
your
right
iPhone to unlock it.
I'm sorry, two people were talking at once.
If you have a new BMW, you can use your iPhone to unlock it. Yes, and BMW 5 Series, they said that that was going to be in iOS 13 before 14 came out, so that's something that was expected.
I just want to say something regarding Twitter. Just heard it on the news. They had a break-in. High-profile profiles have been hacked into.
Yep. Quite a few of them.
I couldn't understand what he said. Something about a break-in someplace?
Several key Twitter accounts were hacked.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin thing, including Obama, Elon Musk,
I can't imagine them responding
Bill
to
Gates.
a free money thing like that. You
Yeah,
pay
well,
us $1,000 and we'll give
right.
you $2,000 back. I just can't imagine Obama and Gates doing that.
The solicitation was sent out in their names.
Yeah. That's got to be it. Because it just, what is it your mother told you? If it's too good, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So
Scott has his hand up, but he has no video.
I'm not sure why I don't have video, but I don't need it really. My question was, as you know, Ann, I just bought a brand new Mac, upgraded SSD, extra memory in January. Now that they're coming out with this new chip the end of the year, Apple is, I'm just wondering what the future holds for that new Mac I just invested in. Year 2021, 22, 23.
It's good for, it'll be good for the next 5 years. And then in 5 years, they'll stop supporting it and you won't be able to, the only thing you won't be able to do, and Big Sur, you won't be able to run iOS and iPad apps natively. That will require the new chip.
In other words, what John's saying is you're going to use it as a paperweight.
It's good for 5
5
years.
years.
they've even announced that there's still new stuff coming that has Intel chips in it. And that the only thing that will be released before the end of the year, they're only going to release apparently one machine before the end of the year with an ARM chip in it, or as they like to say, an Apple silicon chip. But moreover, I would expect that they'll be making a complete transition, but they've promised that they're going to continue to support it for probably 4 years or so. And in California, you know, the law is that I believe they have to carry parts and stuff for 7 years. So you're okay.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
Sometimes if you wait, you'll never buy.
Right.
And there's another side to that is, do you want to be the first one to have one of these new computers? I mean, that's
Yeah.
No,
for the guinea pigs to
They're
try
also
it out.
They're not going to be the strongest of the machines either,
Mm-hmm.
because the A chip just isn't that strong as yet.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to hold off on something like that. Leo Laporte said he's going to buy one, but he's pretty sure it's not going to be very powerful.
Well, Leo Laporte has more money than God, so he can afford to buy a paperweight.
Peter, is that your hand up? You have to touch your space bar to talk. You have to hold your space bar to talk. No, you're not coming through. No audio. Just there you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I had myself muted too. That was just my arm on a chair. I wasn't really holding it up. Yeah, I wasn't able to get in on my MacBook Pro with the password the
Yes,
link.
we know you're in now, so that's a mute question.
Well,
It's
I
not
am
a
in
mute
now.
question. We don't know if Jason will be able to get in. And
Where is the updated link? That's what I just wanted to know.
I redid it on the BBS and I sent out a new MailChimp about half an hour ago, and that one's correct.
Okay.
Whatever you did,
Okay,
you got
thank
in.
you. Yeah, I got in on the other machine. Yeah.
Somebody asked the question, I think it was John Honert posted a question in the Zoom mailbox, and I think it was for his sister. And the question was, if you have a printer that was formerly on a wireless connection with your Mac, and you then connect it by USB, will it work automatically? And I said, I'm not sure, but I think it will just automatically sense the printer there.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
You already have the drivers because it's working, so you just plug it in, you don't do anything, it'll just work.
Yeah. The unfortunate part of it, though, and I'm not sure about this either, is that if you have been using it to print from your telephone or from your iPad, that I think when you plug it in, it will cancel that out. I won't swear to that, but I think that it will cancel it out.
Depends on the printer.
I think it'll cancel it out if you go by USB. If you hook it up by Ethernet, it should work.
Okay.
It'll be on the network.
Yeah.
Depends on if the printer has Wi-Fi and AirPrint, it'll probably still be available.
The AirPrint.
Hey, Jason's here. Yeah, woohoo!
Ken, you've got a question.
No, usually USB won't do anything with the network.
Okay.
Is there,
Kenji, you got
yeah, is there any point to having my Mac connected to the network by Wi-Fi and Ethernet simultaneously? I see I can do that.
No, it'll just it'll default to the Ethernet connection, I believe. Okay. And the Ethernet is always going to be more reliable, and you'll get your full benefit of whatever broadband you've got.
Okay.
Welcome, Jason Snell's in the audience. He made it in even with our bad link. He figured it out. And Jason, I made you a co-host if you need to do
yes, no
anything
audio
else
or
being
video
co-host.
yet.
Yeah, he's not logged in, but he can hear me. He can hear. Yay! Hi, Jason.
I'm here. I just didn't want to interrupt. What was going on?
We had a bad invite link. I had to redo it at the last second.
I clicked on that link, but then I clicked on the next one, and that one worked. So
yeah, exactly. We got 34 people, so we're up to pretty much normal. We usually expect to get more for a meeting like this, but there's probably some people that are clicking on the other link. It doesn't work. But I sent out a MailChimp after I figured it out like 5 minutes before the meeting is supposed to start, and that's what people usually do.
So this is our Q&A period, Jason, where we try and stump the chumps. And in our weekly afternoon meetings, our Q&A is very productive, but at our general meetings, people are a little more reticent. I don't know exactly why, but they are. So anybody else got any issues that they need to discuss or ask about?
I do.
Yeah.
I have problems with mail, and I didn't check the BBS just before I jumped on, but John left a posting saying that he doesn't use Apple Mail in Catalina, and I was wondering if he could share what mail app
That's because I use Mail, but I don't use Catalina.
Oh, I see. I see.
Too many 32-bit apps, and I don't like Mail in Catalina. They took out the features where you click on the columns to sort and resize the columns and drag them around. That doesn't work for me. What do you think about, Jason? What do you think about Mail and what they do? Why did they do that to the column headings?
I got to be honest. I stopped using Mail like 5 years ago. And I am using Catalina, but also not using Mail in Catalina. I switched. So my primary mail is it's Google Apps for domains, but it's basically Gmail for my own personal domain. And I'm using, for the last 5 years, I've used MailPlane, which is it's basically a Mac app wrapper around the Gmail web interface. So it gives you all the kind of like keyboard shortcuts and drag and drop for attachments and things like that that you expect from a real Mac app. But in the center window, it's Gmail, and Gmail is really fast. And the search is great, and it's got a few weird things, but I got so frustrated because I was searching. I never was satisfied with the quality of search in Apple Mail. I never got the results I wanted. And in Gmail, since I was using a Gmail client or Gmail for my email anyway, I would always end up switching over there and find it in 1 second by searching. And so I decided that. And also I've always been frustrated about how Apple Mail oftentimes will let you know you have a new message, and then you look at the inbox and it's too busy doing other things in other mailboxes to actually show you your inbox. And I don't know what the priorities of the people who write Apple Mail are, but
it looks to me like they made mail similar. They want to make it like the iPad, and there's no columns and clicking on headings and resizing headings and all that stuff. It's all gone. And people bitch about it. You Google it. People are bitching about it on the Apple forums like crazy. I can't use this anymore.
I use Mail on iPad and iPhone, and I find it perfectly fine on them. I don't use the Gmail app there, but on the Mac, I just have given up on Apple Mail. Who knows? Maybe it'll wrap around. Maybe it'll end up being
like when they did
in a Big Sur and in iPadOS 14. They're introducing the concept of the sidebar and the 3-column view to the iPad, which probably means that it's in favor at Apple, and therefore that stuff's going to come back on the Mac too into prominence because they want it all to be kind of the same.
I mean, they got to eat their own dog food in-house and use Apple Mail. You'd think, why would they dumb it down like that?
I don't know.
Well, so does Gmail have a separate app, or are you talking about using Gmail on the internet?
So on my Mac, there's an app called MailPlane, and it's a Mac app with Mac keyboard shortcuts and a bunch of other little Mac things, and it's wrapped around Gmail. So it shows you're looking at the Gmail web interface, but it's got a whole bunch of sort of Mac friendly features too. MailPlane, where can you get MailPlane? Let me see here.
Is it a Chrome extension, or is it actually an app?
No, it's an app. It's a full-on app. You can go to mailplaneapp.com, mailplaneapp.com. MailPlane app, and what they say is it's the best way to use Gmail on your Mac. If you are using Gmail, I say give it a try. It's a commercial app. You have to buy it, but it's got it's what convinced me to just use the Gmail interface, because it adds that whole. It's got a Mac toolbar, Mac keyboard shortcuts. You can drag and drop images in to messages, and all of that stuff is there. So it feels more like a Mac app than just using, because also I don't like having my email open in a web browser window, because then I don't know about you, I reflexively close web browser windows, and I don't want my email to be part of that. I don't want closing my web browser windows to also close my email, if that makes sense. So it's anyway, I've been using that for a long time, and I don't regret it, because the Gmail interface is pretty good. It's super fast and responsive, and the search is spectacularly good. And Mail is not responsive, I think, and is bad at searching.
Jason, what about multiple email accounts? Now, I carry 7 different email accounts on Apple Mail, and will MailPlane allow for that?
It's it's a Gmail thing, so it won't really. You can have multiple Gmails. You would either need to forward your messages into a Gmail account, or you would need to log into multiple Gmail instances, because that's, in the end, it's Gmail is what it is.
Strictly Gmail, okay.
Yes, it is literally wrapped around the web. It's a Mac app built around the outside of the Gmail web interface. So at its core, it's the Gmail, but it's great.
Don Nelson uses, you hear Don? Don uses Outlook because he has Office. If you have Microsoft Office, you have Outlook.
Somebody's got their radio on, John. They walked on.
Don there?
Yeah, that's true. I use Apple Mail for my laptop, but I use Outlook for my desktop machine, because I just really, I haven't found enough good reasons to switch.
Eugene has his hand up.
Yes. Yeah, I had a question. I have a 2011 Mac Mini, and when I started up, I loved the chimes. And then I bought a 2018 Mac Mini, and the chimes wasn't there. And
Right.
I understand with the new operating system, is it coming back?
What they say.
I read that it is coming back, but there is a command that you can use in terminal that will bring it back. But I've tried it and it works once, and then the next time you restart, it isn't there anymore.
I tried it and it didn't work at all. So I guess I just wait.
See, I tried it on I have an iMac Pro and it worked. And it starts up with the chime every time now. But yes, in Big Sur, there's literally a preference you can check to turn it on.
Turn it on and off.
So how long do I need to wait until the fall or something like that?
Yeah, September.
Yeah, I mean, if you tried that, if you tried that that thing and it didn't work for you, but yeah, you're supposed to do the little terminal command and it's supposed to turn it back on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I have to say too, on the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, it sounds really good. They've got some little woofers in there that really make it a full sound.
When I hear it, it just makes me feel good, like everything is running correctly.
Well, it's a great diagnostic because the startup sound will tell you if you've got bad RAM or other things that I never understood people who tried to purposely mute it.
Also helps with the timing if you have to hold down a keyboard shortcut to do some troubleshooting, like start off an external drive or go into recovery mode. I always found like the chime, right after the chime is the perfect time to press the keyboard. And if you don't hear the chime, you're waiting and hoping to see like the backlight come on your screen or something, and it may be too late if you. So like, I think it's got some practical use too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to keep hitting the key. Just repeat it.
Mm-hmm. And hope your timing is right.
So Suzanne, tell us about your request that you posted on the bulletin board for a used laptop, and how are you really sure that you can have a courier pick it up and get it to you there in Ecuador?
I don't think she knows about the audio.
Suzanne, in order to talk, hold the space bar down. Hold your space bar down to talk. It's like push to talk. There you go.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You have a very well-made Zoom meeting. I've been on other meetings where I couldn't hear what the people were saying, and the one this afternoon could not hear me speak, so I wasn't sure if this mic was working.
Working fine. Very well. Tell us about your need for a used MacBook. So for the rest of you who don't know, Susan posted on the bulletin board, she's in Ecuador, that she's looking for a used MacBook Pro that it's going to be convoluted. Somebody's going to ship it to Florida and a courier is going to pick it up in Florida and bring it to you or to some friend of yours, right?
You're muted again, Suzanne. You must
have to
press
hold
and
that
hold your
space bar
space
down
bar
and talk.
down to speak. You're off again, Suzanne. Press your space bar and keep it down to talk.
Unmute her.
You can't. You can ask her to unmute.
Use MacBook Pro, right?
Yeah, we're asking you to tell us about it. You've got an audience that you can ask.
She keeps muting herself.
Okay, thank you.
Suzanne, when you talk, hold the space bar while you're talking.
I suggest you
This is
post on
the
the
space.
BBS.
This is the space bar.
Yes, hold it down to speak. Release it to mute. So we're asking you to explain what it is that you need, and you know, that used MacBook Pro that you asked about on the bulletin board.
Yeah,
Here's an
MacBook
opportunity for
Pro
you to tell people what you're looking for.
is MacBook Pro, and these are Plantronic. This is a Plantronic headset.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we?
Okay.
Next question.
Good to have you.
Let's move on to the presentation. We can handle any other questions that are
7
regularly-
o'clock.
Yeah. Last call for questions. Last question. None appearing? I yield the floor and I mute myself now.
So we'll turn it over to you, Jason, and you can share your screen or whatever you plan on doing.
Right. This is my second Zoom user group meeting that I've done. And
Nice.
what I discovered the last time was that it was really kind of nice and freeing to not have slides, because then I have to do screen sharing, and then are you seeing me or are you seeing my slides? And I just decided I would not do slides, so I have a little outline in front of me and I'm just going to talk.
All right.
And we can either, if, you know, I'm going to be busy talking, so if there's something that I need to stop and clarify, we could do that. And I'm happy to hang around at the end and answer questions too. However you want to handle that. But I'll just keep going until somebody gets my attention. And I've got the chat window open in case, or you can just, you know, shout it out. That would be
usually we mute people when we start the presenter, so that people don't, they answer the phone and then it switches to them on the screen. And
right, yeah. So
we got one co-host who's just watching just that.
Yeah. Okay. And like I said, I'm happy to address if something big comes up. I can stop, and if not, then I'm happy to answer questions at the end. This is basically an Apple status report. The last user group I went to was right before WWDC, so there was a lot of sort of speculation about what that was going to be. But now we know everything. We know everything Apple's, well, not everything. We know a lot of things about where Apple is going for the rest of this year, and actually for the next couple of years. We've got a lot more information now than we did even 2 months ago about what Apple's plans are. So as part of the status report, I want to start with where we are right now, which is Apple's laptops are finally solid again after several years where people were really griping and complaining, especially about the keyboard on the Apple laptops. With the 13-inch MacBook Pro that came out earlier this year, and the new MacBook Air with a new keyboard, which, they're basically unchanged other than some very minor changes, and the keyboard, which is not a minor change. And these days, honestly, my default laptop recommendation, which I struggled with what laptop I recommended to people for several years in there, but now my default laptop recommendation is the MacBook Air. I think it's great. I actually just bought one for my daughter because she had an old original 12-inch MacBook that was not really suitable for the stuff that she's doing, and I bought the new MacBook Air with a keyboard, and it's great. The $999 model is great. The upgrade model is even greater. And for now, although with some of the news that came out at Apple's developer conference, if you can wait and not buy a laptop right now, not everybody can, but if you can wait, maybe a good time to wait, because we're about to have a big change in the Mac that I'll get to, and I'm sure you've heard about, but we'll talk about it a little bit. The other big news that's happened so far this year, up till before WWDC, was, of course, the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, which has a trackpad on it, and that they shipped cursor support for the iPad as a part of that in a software update. That's something we didn't really, I think, expect to come until iPadOS 14 maybe, and so not until the fall. And instead, they shipped it in the spring, and it's great. I've got one right here, and I love it. And that really changes the game on the iPad to have proper pointer support. And I'll mention here while I'm talking about it that there's a session. So all of Apple's developer sessions from WWDC are up on their website. And they did a session about designing for the iPad pointer. And, I'm not a developer, and most of you are probably not developers, but I would say I love that session. And I think if you're interested in design or how computers work or how the people who make computers think about how computers work, I highly recommend that designing for the iPad pointer session from WWDC. It's, it's maybe half an hour long. It's a video presentation that they did kind of recorded beforehand. But it's so interesting to see what a lot of the people on the iPad team have been doing in terms of essentially adding back features that the Mac has had all along and that the iPad didn't have. But instead of just sort of aping the Mac, what they've done is they go through this process of sort of like, how would we do this today? And so the pointer is a great example of that, which is the Mac essentially has the same cursor it had in 1984. And they didn't want to quite bring that to the iPad for a bunch of really good reasons. And that session goes into them about like precision and like why they have it change into different shapes at different times, which honestly, I now look at my Mac and I think I wish I had that on the Mac too. We probably will someday. Anyway, I highly recommend that. And as an iPad user, I'm so happy that we've gotten to the point where we've got full-on pointer support on the iPad, and that Magic Keyboard is pretty great. It's expensive, but it is really good. So that's the trade-off there. Then WWDC happened, and we learned a lot. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. The big news being this transition to Apple Silicon. Probably a lot of us remember. I was thinking about this today. I actually posted a link today on my website about the first chip transition, which was PowerPC from Motorola 68000 processors, and how Apple had this guy in the background writing basically an emulator, code translator, to see if they could make a chip transition and still run all their old software. And of course, then they did it again, going from PowerPC to Intel, and now they're going to do it again, going from Intel to Apple Silicon. So Apple's really good at this, and they know what they're doing. But one of the things that I think comes up a lot about the Apple Silicon transition is sort of what it is. We've been talking there. A lot of people say ARM processors, which is technical jargon. Not everybody knows about ARM. ARM is a company that licenses chip patents, basically, and chip reference designs. The Apple Silicon is probably not ultimately what this thing is going to be called. They're probably going to have a chip. It'll probably be like the M14 or something. Like it'll be a name for it that we'll call it. But for now, it's Apple Silicon. And the idea here is, for the last while now, well, let me back it up. Let me back up. When Apple was making the move from PowerPC to Intel, they did a lot of investigation about chip makers because they weren't sure whether Intel was the right way to go or if they should use some other chip maker. And there was a lot of experimentation and questioning about how they were going to do it. And one of the companies they talked to was this company that they were very impressed by, but ultimately it was easier to just sort of build Intel PCs and have them run Mac OS. But that company was called PA Semi, and they bought them. And after the Intel transition, they bought them. And PA Semi became Apple's chip design group. And so for the last decade plus, iPhones and iPads have been running on chips designed by Apple's chip design group. So Apple doesn't fabricate their own chips. They have a company make them for them. But Apple designs them. And so Apple Silicon is essentially Apple saying that the Mac is going to run on those same system on a chip designs that they use on the iPhone and the iPad. And if you haven't followed the horse race on that side and you're thinking, what does this mean that iPhone chips are going to be in the Mac? The Mac needs much more power, and is the iPhone really capable of that? I would say Apple is so far ahead of its competition on the iPhone side that for the last few years, by the time the new iPhone comes out, there's still not an Android phone that's as fast as the last iPhone. And then they lap them again. So Apple's way ahead here. And the advantage of the ARM-style processor is that it's power efficient, and there's a power to energy ratio, and you need power efficiency in a mobile device, right? And so they've really pushed that part of their design process. And going to the Mac, it'll be good on laptops. We'll have to see how it works on desktops, because there isn't an iPad or an iPhone that you just leave plugged in, but an iMac or a Mac Mini or a Mac Pro, you do. Anyway, we have, as Mac users, we got a taste for Apple Silicon. Many Macs sold in the last few years actually have an Apple design processor in it. It's the first the T1 and then the T2. The Touch Bar MacBook Pros have it. The Retina MacBook Air has it. The iMac Pro has it. The new Mac Mini has it. The Mac Pro has it. Every currently shipping Mac except the iMac has it. And that processor is essentially an Apple design processor that's taking a bunch of the jobs that used to be done elsewhere in the computer, and it's doing them. And this is, you could see, this is Apple's engineers trying to find ways to get their chip making capability in the Mac without replacing that Intel chip. And now they're going to do the part where they're going to replace the Intel chip. And the developer community now is currently spending the summer using a sample Mac called the Developer Transition Kit, which is something you'll never be able to buy, but it's basically a Mac Mini with an Apple processor in it. And the processor in it is essentially the processor that Apple shipped with the iPad Pro in 2018. It's a variant of that. It's got one more graphics core. It's the one that's shipping in the 2020 iPad Pro, but the secret is it is the chip from 2018. So if you think about it, Apple is shipping a 2-year-old processor, and the early results that are secret and not supposed to be released but have leaked out from the developer kit are extremely encouraging. So if you think about how a 2-year-old chip is already a really fast Mac Mini, essentially, imagine what the first Apple Silicon Macs will ship with, because it will be 2 years more current than that. I think everybody anticipates that the new Apple Silicon Macs will actually be really fast and very power efficient. But there's a lot of complexity here, right? Like, they are bringing out a thing called Rosetta 2, which is that code translation stuff. So your old software will run. I have to put a footnote here. When I say all of your old Mac software will run on Apple Silicon, what I mean is all of your software that runs on Catalina. Because a lot of people aren't on Catalina. A lot of people are relying on 32-bit older apps that don't run on Catalina. I think it's a fair thing to speculate that the reason that Apple made 32-bit apps go away on Catalina is that they kind of wanted Catalina to be the bad cop, and for this new Mac OS running on Big Sur running on Apple Silicon to be the good cop. So it's not Catalina, or it's not Big Sur. It's not Apple Silicon that killed all your old apps. It's Catalina. Catalina was mean. But this is a 2-step process. They didn't want to emulate 32-bit on their ARM processors, so they killed them last year. And but if it does run on Catalina, it will run on Apple Silicon, and that code will just be translated. It'll actually be translated when you download it from the App Store or when you run an installer to install it. And then if neither of those catches it, it'll do it when you first launch it. It'll translate it, and it'll look at all the Intel instructions and just turn them into Apple Silicon instructions instead. And I would imagine that they'll run at 70 or 80% speed, which will probably be good enough for most uses. And of course, developers are spending all summer trying to recompile their apps to run on Apple Silicon. So there'll be a bunch of software updates, and those apps will be the ones that run at native speed. If you are thinking back to the Intel transition, the other thing you might remember about that is that it was actually really hard for developers, and there was a lot of software that was really delayed because back then a lot of software was being written on a bunch of different platforms and not on Apple software development platforms. So like Code Warrior, a lot of people were writing their apps in Code Warrior. And that meant for them to come to Intel, they needed to move off of Code Warrior and into Xcode and then go to Intel. And so you saw a lot of software that really lagged behind. And that's not going to happen this time, because at this point, everybody is developing Mac software in Xcode. So there's still work to be done, but it's sort of one step instead of two steps, where the first step is completely rip out everything that you've done in this one development environment and move it over. So I think the software is going to go native a lot faster. I think do we have a little echo? Somebody come in with a unmuted mic or something? I don't know. I was getting a little echo there.
Yeah, I think you got it out.
Okay, thank you. So there are a lot of questions about this Apple Silicon. Apple isn't talking, right? They said exactly what they wanted to say and nothing more. There are questions for people who have like powerful systems like a high-end MacBook Pro or a Mac Pro or something like that. Like Apple's integrated graphics on the iPhone and the iPad is actually really great. It's very powerful stuff. But if you need a high-end Mac that has like an external graphics card or something like that, a lot of the story of these Apple Silicon Macs is going to be, what does a Mac have that an iPhone or iPad doesn't have, and is Apple going to build that, and how are they going to build it? So like support for an external graphics card is not something the iPhone and the iPad have had to do, but Macs do that. So are they going to do that? And if so, how are they going to do that? I think a really great example of this, and actually a good sign for Mac users about how Apple is approaching this, is what happens when right before we started the presentation, there was that one question about the startup chime. And it's funny, startup on iPad and iPhone is very different than it is on the Mac, right? Like you can't boot from an external drive on an iPhone or an iPad. There's no concept of that. There's no concept of holding down a keyboard key at startup and booting into a different thing, into a recovery partition or something like that. Like, none of those ideas are in existence on the iPhone and the iPad. And what Apple said at WWDC is they have rebuilt that part of the boot process to support those Mac features. So on an Apple Silicon Mac, you actually won't have to remember how you use AppRAM and how you boot off of an external and how you go into recovery mode and how you go into target mode. You actually hold down the power button. And if you hold down the power button when you're starting up, it takes you to the menu, the recovery menu. At which point you can do all of those things. You can set a startup disk or run disk utility or do internet recovery or do regular recovery or whatever. And that includes booting into a different boot drive, which is not something that they ever had to build for the iPhone or the iPad, but they built it for the Mac. So I'm encouraged by that they're rebuilding some parts of the core here for Apple Silicon because they know that Mac users need them. And similarly, one of the big questions was, can I run my software like on the Apple Silicon? Are they going to make it everything goes through the Mac App Store and I have no control over what software I'm going to run on my Mac? And none of that is the case. You can do anything with a Mac running Apple Silicon that you can do on a regular Mac, with like the minor exceptions are things like kernel extensions, but they introduced last year a bunch of changes so that apps that rely on kernel extensions have another way of getting into that. So, but like, if you want to download something from a random website and run it, they're not going to stop you. Not even on Apple Silicon. They're happy to let you do that. And that's what makes the Mac different from the iPhone and the iPad. And they recognize that. I'm encouraged by that. The other big thing you won't be able to do on Apple Silicon, at least at first, is run Windows. So if you use Boot Camp is the whole premise of Boot Camp is that that Windows is also built around Intel processors, and you can boot into Windows on an Intel Mac because it's also a PC essentially. And that's not the case with Apple Silicon. There is a version of Windows that runs on ARM processors, but it runs on very specific ARM processors that are not Apple's ARM processors, and they have some things that are very different about them. So it remains to be seen whether there will one day be a way to either boot or fairly easily virtualize Windows on an Apple Silicon Mac. I'm an optimist here. I think Apple and Microsoft both see it as an advantage to run Windows on a Mac at decent speeds, but it may take a while. And what you may get is not Boot Camp. You may literally just get Parallels or VMware running ARM for Windows in a virtual machine, because they are doing virtualization on Apple Silicon, and they announced that they're doing it for like Linux, but Windows is still a question mark. Like, you can't even buy ARM Windows right now. It only comes out bundled with the ARM devices that they're selling it. But it's early yet. I do think that in the end, neither Microsoft or Apple is going to turn their backs completely on people who want to use Windows on Mac hardware. All right. Let me talk about operating system stuff. So WWDC is the time when Apple does its big, here's what we're going to be doing. Here's the operating system stuff we're going to ship in the fall and update throughout the year. And most people will be running it for a year. So we're really looking like, what's the next year like for Apple in terms of operating system stuff? And they made a bunch of announcements. I want to start with the stuff that they announced universally, because there's actually a bunch of stuff that goes across all of their platforms, and I think we're going to see more and more of this over time. But like, they made a bunch of improvements to messages. Like, you can pin conversations at the top of your messages window, and this is on all platforms. You can take any thread and you put a little custom picture on it. So I've got like a family chat, and I've got a picture of my family on it. You can reply to specific messages in messages now. So if you've got a bunch of things ping-ponging back and forth in like a group chat, and you want to reply to something somebody said a little while ago, you can actually tap on it and say, reply to this. And then your reply is attached to what you're replying to, which is kind of nice. And my favorite feature that they added is mentions, which basically means if you are on a group chat and you can't, if you're like me, you're on this family group chat and you have to turn off notifications because nobody will say anything for a week, and then there'll be 18 messages in the course of like 10 minutes. This happened to me today. And it happened to me once during an Apple keynote, and I was like, oh, I can't ever do that again. Well, now you can set it in the new operating systems. You can set it to only notify you when somebody mentions your name, and that means you can also explicitly mention somebody's name in one of those threads, and you know that you're kind of pinging them, which is a really nice thing that you see in other social media services that they're going to roll into messages. Maps gets a big update. If any of you ride your bike around, the Bay Area, fortunately, is going to be one of the first places to get this feature. Their bike directions, it knows about bike paths. It knows about hills and climbs, so you can actually say, don't take me on the steep hills. It will make some judgments about like the best bike path. You can say, try to avoid traffic, and it will reroute you in a different way. I did this. I have a big bike path by my house, and I was very impressed. It knows when to get on the bike path and when to get off the bike path. I was very impressed by that. It's got support for electric cars, which is exciting, although there's a footnote there, which is that it's some electric cars, and Apple has to be able to talk to them or talk to their apps. So I imagine not all electric cars will be supported, but the idea there is that in theory, you're going to be able to say, I need to go from here to there with my electric car, and it will know how much battery you've got and what kind of chargers you've got and where the chargers are in between your destination and where you are now. And we'll be able to say, you need to go here and then charge and then continue on, and have that right within Maps instead of having to use a third-party service for that. And then my favorite Maps feature that I want to mention, because I don't think it got enough play, and I think it's pretty cool, is if you've ever been in a big city, down in San Francisco, New York City, any big city with lots of tall buildings, you'll find that the GPS is really bad because you can't see very much of the sky, and a lot of times it's so dense that you can't really pick up from the wireless around you, and your phone doesn't know where it is. And I've had that happen in lots of big cities where my little dot kind of drifts around, or it's like a block off, or it has no idea where I am. And they've added this feature that uses machine learning where you basically hold up your phone and it looks at what's across the street, the buildings across the street with a camera. And it matches that to their database because, they have those trucks that drive down all the streets and do the street view stuff. And so it'll search their database for what your camera is seeing and match it, and then, oh, those buildings, that's where they are, and it matches it, and then it zeroes in on that location, and it knows where you are, which is not only absolute proof that they're going to do augmented reality goggles or glasses at some point, because that's an AR feature if ever there was one. But also, I think it's a pretty cool way to get around the problem of having really bad directions sometimes when you're in an urban center, because your phone doesn't know where you actually are. And a couple other features that are universal.
I think you just froze.
Yeah, I see him as frozen as well.
Well, I see me as here, but that's just me.
You're back. You're back.
You're back.
Yeah, I think I had a dropout. Anyway, translation, so you can translate web pages, and which is great. So it's only like 9 languages and all that, but like I always end up clicking a link that goes to a German web page, and I'm like, okay, I took college German, I can kind of, and now it'll just say, hey, this is in German. Would you like me to translate it? And it translates it. It's and on all the platforms, iPhone and iPad too. So those are going to be everywhere, but like there's some specific things. The widgets, new widgets is the big one, which is that they have designed new widgets like you would see in the Today View on the iPhone or the iPad, widgets like you'd see in Notification Center on the Mac. There's a new single method for that for all developers, for all platforms. There's one way to write these new widgets. They behave the same across all the platforms. The big one where that's going to come into play is on the iPhone. You can actually put widgets on the home screen of the iPhone starting in iOS 14. So you put like your weather, you can make stacks of them. So you can have like your weather, and I've got like my weather and my mom's weather. My mom lives in Phoenix. So I look at my weather and it says 70 degrees, and then I flip and it says 109. I think I'm glad I'm here. And then I flip back, you gotta flip through different widgets, or you can just park them on there. They're big. The small widget is 2 by 2 in terms of the iPhone grid. So you're going to get basically 4 of your app icons are going to get elbowed out by doing that. And then there's also one that's 2 by 4. So 8 of your icons will disappear if you put that one down. And the large one is 4 by 4. So it's 4 rows of your home screen get replaced by a giant widget. But it's the first time you've really been able to mix and match apps with something else on the home screen. I think people are going to like it. Apple's widgets are pretty good. And then, by the time this all ships, developers of all of your favorite apps are going to write their own widgets, and those are going to be available. And like I said, they're available on the Mac and the iPad and the iPhone. On the iPad, they go in the little sidebar. On the Mac, they go in the notification center, which has been redesigned a little bit. And on the iPhone, they can go in the Today View, which is sort of swiping. It's like to the left side of the home screen. Or they can go right on any page of your home screen if you want, which is pretty big. And that dovetails with another big iOS feature, which is you can, if you have like pages and pages and pages of apps on your phone, most of which you never go to, you can hide all those pages. You can hide all your extra app pages if you want to, and just search for them. And they've got this new app library thing, which is basically like a fancy search for your apps that will suggest some apps and it'll let you type just like you can already, really, to search for apps. But I'm somebody who made a bunch of folders and threw all my apps in it, because if it's not on page 1 of my home screen, I'm just going to search for it. And I'm looking forward to being able to just not even bother and just turn all those pages off. And I've got my 1 or 2 pages of apps and widgets, and then everything else I'll just search for. Feature I really love in the iPhone that you're going to get is, and the iPad too, is if somebody calls you while you're working, it doesn't like totally make your app go away and replace it with the call interface. Instead, you just kind of get a mega notification that drops down from the top of the screen, which is really nice. It's nice to not have, nobody would design today a feature where somebody else who's not using your device and who you may not even know can interrupt what you're doing just by entering your number in. But that's how the phone stuff has worked, because when the iPhone came out, it was a phone, and today it's not really a phone. Phone is one of the things that it does, and it's not special enough to merit that. So I love that feature, and that's also true for Siri. Actually, if you trigger Siri, it doesn't cover up your whole interface. It just puts the little Siri logo at the bottom of the screen, which I think is also really nice. And then even the answers from Siri just kind of pop up. They don't cover the whole screen. And picture in picture, which used to just be on the iPad, is also going to be on the iPhone. So if you can like pop a video out, and that also means that if you're FaceTiming with somebody and you need to go check, again, this is one of those things where like I check the weather while I'm talking to my mom on FaceTime. And currently on my iPad, she goes in a little picture in picture window and it's all fine. On my iPhone, it says that, the call is suspended and she can't see what I'm doing while I'm like checking something in another app. And in iOS 14, that all goes away. You can have picture in picture. You can play videos while you're also looking around in another app. It all just kind of works. It's really nice. There's a translation app on the iPhone in iOS 14. You can actually translate when you're offline. You don't have to have an internet connection. So if you travel internationally, and I know we all are dreaming about one day being allowed to travel again, that's a nice feature because you don't always have internet when you're traveling, especially internationally, and it will work to translate what somebody says into your language and vice versa without actually needing to go out over the internet. And then actually the biggest thing I think about the iPhone beyond the widgets is about the future, and it's stuff that's not, we can talk about it now, but it's really going to be a year or two before you see the impact of it. And it's two things I wanted to mention. One is Car Key, which actually shipped. There's an iOS update for iOS 13 that came out today that has initial support for this. And then it's a big part of Apple's future plans. There are a bunch of cars that are going to start shipping this fall that use NFC, which is basically like the Apple Pay stuff, to use your phone as a car key. And the idea there is you tap the door and it, like an Apple Pay, and it opens the door. But because it needs to have that close contact, then you have to also have a reader inside the car. You have to lay it down on the reader, and then you can use it as a key to start the car. But the iPhone 11s all have this U1 chip that doesn't really do anything right now. It's an ultra wideband chip, it's called. It really doesn't have any features right now. But the next generation of car keys and cars will support that chip, will support ultra wideband. And that's when it gets really kind of exciting. And again, none of us probably get a new car every year, so it might take a while. But the idea that in a couple of years, the cars will all have support for this thing, and ultra wideband knows exactly where your device is in space. And what that means is you can just keep it in your pocket or your bag or your purse, your phone, because it knows when you're at the door and knows to unlock. And it knows that then the phone is inside the car, and therefore it's safe to drive the car away. So that Apple's all laying the groundwork for that now. And in 5 years, everybody's going to look around and say, "Oh, we all use our phones to drive our cars now." I get it, but it's gonna take 5 or longer years before it becomes commonplace. But they're laying the groundwork now, and it'll start happening this fall. And then the other thing that's going to take a while is this thing called app clips, which is little mini versions of apps, like little partial apps that get downloaded and run like automatically when you scan a code, either by tapping on a NFC sticker or by scanning like a QR code with your camera. And the problem that's trying to solve, the way I try to describe this to people is 2 years ago, I was on a road trip with my family, and we were in Salt Lake City downtown, and I remember spending like 10 minutes trying to download their app so that I could pay for parking at a parking meter. Because they had gone all digital, but I had to download the app, wait for it to download. We were in a dead spot, so it was it took forever for it to download. Then I had to get my credit card out and manually enter it while looking at it here in order to put my credit card in, and I had to create an account. I had to do all of this stuff in order to pay to park in this meter in downtown Salt Lake City. And the idea with app clips, especially if you combine it with Apple's sign in for Apple stuff, sign in with Apple that they introduced last year, and Apple Pay. The dream is you get to that parking meter and you do the app clip, and the app just loads immediately because it's this mini version of the app. And I don't have to create an account because I can sign in with Apple, and I don't have to enter in a credit card number because I can use Apple Pay. And so I can just sort of go boop on the parking meter and go tap, tap, done, and I've parked. And that's the dream. And it may happen, but it's going to take a while because they're going to have to develop these app clips, and they're going to have to put those stickers out there, and they're going to have to support Apple's other technologies, and it's probably going to take a while. But I think it's got a lot of potential to smooth out a lot of the really annoying things about using your smartphone to do stuff in the real world in the future. Want to move on real quick, talk about the iPad, and then I'll get to the Mac because I think the biggest stuff is happening on the Mac. Big things on the iPad are mostly Apple Pencil support for this scribble thing, which is kind of like the Newton. You can write things with the Apple Pencil and it just gets converted into text, which is great because if you ever use the Apple Pencil with your iPad and then found all of a sudden that you need to enter some text in, it becomes one of those moments where you're like, well, how do I? You got to put down the pencil and then pick it back up again. And now you don't have to do that. You just write the words that you need to write and they just kind of get translated. It's pretty amazing. And there's some other great kind of like taking notes in the Notes app features for the Apple Pencil. But the real gift to the iPad was the pointer support that they added already this spring when they came out with the Magic Keyboard. So I think that's the big iPad feature of the year is actually already with us. And that brings me to Big Sur, which is macOS 11. So macOS 10, which has been with us for 20 years, is no more. Now it's macOS 11, Big Sur. And they chose the right time, I think, to do this because this is very clearly the biggest design change that the Mac has had since OS 10. It's huge. And I think this is Apple really trying to set it up that the Mac and the iPhone and the iPad are all going to look like cousins. They're all going to be very similar. The Windows in Big Sur, if you haven't had a chance to see it, it is really different. Like if you remember back when every Apple window was brushed metal, it was like dark and had a texture on it. You know, going from today's Mac to Big Sur it makes today's Mac look like the big heavy brushed metal. Today's Mac with a little light gray windows because the windows on Big Sur are white. The text in the title bar and the toolbar are collapsed into one. The titles are aligned to the left instead of centered in your window. They're bold, but on a white background. The icon that's up in the title bar is hidden unless you mouse over it. Like the toolbar items are just icons until you move your mouse over them, and then they get a little outline showing you that they're a button. It's really different. I kind of like it, but it's like really light. It's really different. The sidebar is segmented differently, which I know is kind of esoteric, but you know when you see it. It's like the little red, green, yellow dots in the top left corner don't belong with the title bar anymore. They belong on their own, and there's like a line. So it's like a 2-column window. Every window has got sort of like the sidebar part and the not sidebar part. It's very striking, very different. Everything is rounded. The dock is rounded. The windows are rounded. The menus are rounded. Like drop-down menus are rounded on all sides. Everything's spaced out more. There's more white space. Makes me suspicious that touchscreen Macs are probably going to actually happen. And also that Macs are going to have curved screen edges too, because everything is curved. Why would they not be? I'm actually a little surprised that they didn't do what the original Mac did and just draw in the curves in the corners to make it look like they're curved, even though they're not actually. All the app icons have been redesigned. They're all rounded rectangles like on the iPad and the iPhone, which means that your favorite app will also have to have its icon redrawn because apps that don't look like that look really weird when they show up in the dock. It's like, why are you a circle? You're supposed to be a rounded rectangle. The menu bar is translucent in an unpleasant way that I don't like at all, but the good news is there's an accessibility setting that says cut it out with the translucency and everything gets kind of solid again, which I suspect a lot of people will turn on and definitely makes it more readable. And beyond the design, like Apple's introducing Control Center in the menu bar, which I actually think ultimately could be really great. Because you can put individual items in the menu bar, those little icons that we have. Some of us have lots of them in our menu bar, but Control Center puts all of the kind of stuff you want to see in one place. I think for a lot of people, especially if you use the iPhone or the iPad, the idea that you have one thing to click on that shows you your brightness, your volume, your Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi, it's all there in one place. And then if you want to have it also be in the menu bar, you can do that. But if you want to keep it uncluttered, you can do that too. And it's in the betas this summer, it's kind of buggy, but I'm encouraged that that's going to get better. And then, like I said, they redesigned Notification Center. It's got all those new widgets in it now, but it's also one pane. Currently on the Mac, Notification Center, which you can get to by clicking on the little Notification Center icon or sort of swiping from the right side of your trackpad back over to the left. It's got two tabs. It's got like Today and Notifications. Today has the old style widgets in them. Notifications is just a big long list of notifications from Notification Center. That's gone. It's just one view. The notifications are at the top. The widgets are at the bottom. It's the same widgets as on the other platforms. And it's nice. The only problem I have with it really is that they put it, to make it visible, you have to click on the clock. I don't think the clock has anything to do with notifications. I don't know why they think it does. I think they're just trying to cut corners and save space in the toolbar, but they should probably have a proper Notification Center icon. But it's nice. They did a good job with it. I think it's going to be good. But it's a big change. I mean, for those of you who aren't on Catalina yet, I mean, it's going to be a big leap because you are ultimately, the next Mac you buy will be an Apple Silicon Mac probably, and it will not support 32-bit apps, and it's going to look really different. It's pretty dramatic. Other changes in there, Safari is a lot better in Big Sur. In addition to the translation stuff, they've got a whole bunch of other stuff, including browser extensions. So like if you ever keep Firefox or Chrome around because they have a cool browser extension that you want to use, there's a standard for browser extensions, and Safari has never supported it. And in this next version of Safari, they're supporting that so that extension developers can basically compile those extensions for Safari and put them in the App Store. And they use the same format as they did on Chrome and Firefox. So if you rely on extensions and are sad that you can't run them in Safari, you actually are going to be able to do that starting this fall. Two big app changes too in Big Sur that are basically they're taking the iPad versions of these apps and putting them on the Mac using the Mac Catalyst technology, and that's Maps and Messages. And although it's scary because Catalyst is different. The Catalyst, everything I'm hearing from developers is that the Catalyst that's in Big Sur is way better than the Catalyst that was in Catalina. But what it gets you is Maps will have all the features that are in the iPhone and the iPad, whereas Maps for the Mac used to lag behind. And Messages really lag behind. Like, I know it's not the world's most important thing that you can't send something with a laser beam or send balloons in a message, but like there's nothing sadder than sitting on your Mac and having somebody send you something and have the little text pop up that says sent with lasers or sent with balloons, because I don't get to see the balloons because I'm on a Mac and the Mac doesn't have support for balloons. But now that they moved Messages from iPad to the Mac using Catalyst in Big Sur, you get all that stuff. You get the everything I said before about pinning or replying, and you get stuff that the Mac just never got over the years, like the little effects and stuff like that. They're all in there, which is really nice. So I think that's a case where Apple just decided they weren't going to put an effort into the Mac version of that. And now because of Catalyst and because of the iPad picking up a bunch of things from the Mac as well, we're in a situation where the Mac's going to get better, I think, appreciably, because it's going to pick up all the work Apple was doing for the last few years on the iPad for Messages and Maps. And before I do, I'm going to wrap up talking about future Apple hardware. I'm going to talk first about a weird thing that's in between. It's a software update for hardware, but it's the AirPods. And Apple's adding this thing called spatial audio to the AirPods Pro. And the idea there is if you're using AirPods to watch a movie or something like that, it's going to sound more surroundy, which I always had skepticism about that. I've got like 5 speakers in my living room and it's a whole surround sound system. And I think, well, how can 2 speakers beat a surround sound system? But the truth is we only have 2 ears. So there are a lot of things the speakers can do to fool your ears into thinking that they're hearing audio from different places. And Apple's going to do some more of that. And what's really clever about it is that they're using sensors in the AirPods to determine where your head, it's head tracking. It's kind of like, again, it's probably technology that they're also building for augmented reality or virtual reality gear, because it's very much the same idea, is when your head moves around, if you're in a motion, if you're in a soundscape where there's like sounds from over here, sounds from over there, the way that they've got it working is that if you turn your head, the sounds don't track with your head. They stay where they are. And so if you turn to sort of face the left where a sound is coming from, it'll be like it's coming from the center, instead of just kind of pivoting with you. And they're making that available to software developers too. So you could play a game that could theoretically do the same thing. Could be very interesting. For those of us who are a little bit older, I will say I think the most exciting thing about the AirPods software update is going to be headphone accommodations. You can actually change how it filters the sound from the outside world, the AirPods Pro now, from the outside world into your ears. So you can actually set profiles that adjust. You know, it's not going to be the same as like a hearing aid, but you can set profiles to adjust what kind of sound it lets in and how it lets it in, and also adjust how it sounds in different app scenarios. So I actually think I'm very excited about that, because it means that it's going to make AirPods Pro a little more useful in a lot of different circumstances, whereas the first version of the software was very simply kind of like open, closed. It's about all you could do. With accommodations for headphones, you're going to be able to have a lot more control over sort of like what it does to your audio, including the audio it's picking up from the outside world. And so my last little section is about future hardware. Everybody wants to know, and Apple won't say. I can guess. There are also some rumors out there. The iPhones, we don't know because of COVID-19. We really don't know exactly whether there are going to be some delays in getting the iPhone out this fall. My guess is that it'll be pretty close to normal, but there may be shipping delays. It may slide into October and even into November. But what we're expecting are 4 brand new iPhones, which is pretty surprising. That's a lot of iPhones. Rumor has it that we're going to see 2 new iPhone Pros that are like the 12 Pro and the 12 Pro Max, that are basically the next versions of the 11 Pro phones, but with the extra sensor that's on the iPad Pro, the LiDAR sensor, which will help with sort of augmented reality again. And there are some, you know, it makes the AR stuff actually way better, because if you've ever used any AR apps, there's always that really awkward moment at the beginning where you have to sort of like shake your phone around and get it to sort of slowly figure out where everything is in your space. And on the iPad Pro with that LiDAR sensor, you just hold it up and it knows exactly where everything is in space. It's pretty remarkable. So they're going to bring that to the 12 Pro. But the big change sounds like the successor to the iPhone 11, which presumably will be the iPhone 12. They're going to do 2 models of it, one that's bigger and one that's smaller. So if I love the iPhone 11, I think it's really great. My only real complaint about it is that it's still kind of too big for me. And I use an iPhone 11 Pro mostly not because of the 3 cameras. The primary reason is I like the size a little bit better. So the rumors are that there's going to be a smaller iPhone 12 as well as a bigger iPhone 12 to follow off the 11. And I think that's great, because there are a lot of people who would buy the iPhone 11 but still feel like it's too big. So it sounds like Apple may give us some more choice there. And then the big question, which is the Macs. What's going to happen with the Macs? Everything that Apple said at WWDC suggests that there are going to be some more Intel Macs along the way. So we haven't seen the last of that. There's at least one, maybe more to drop there. But they also said by the end of 2020, they're going to start the Apple Silicon transition. So that means this year, Apple plans on shipping Macs with Apple design processors. There are rumors that that's going to be, the original rumor was there was a 13-inch MacBook Pro, but now the rumors are it'll also be the MacBook Air, which makes a lot of sense. And then maybe an iMac. But that's all speculation. We don't really know. And then for me, the big question is, what is Apple doing in terms of changing what the Mac looks like? And if you think back to the Intel transition, Apple's whole message during the Intel transition was, we're keeping it all the same. It's steady. Don't be afraid that it's on Intel. steady as she goes. So the first Intel version of every device was essentially identical to the last PowerPC version on the outside. The idea there was like, take it easy, it's fine. You won't even know that there's a different processor. It's just a Mac. And the question for me about this is Apple going to do that again, or is Apple going to use this as an opportunity to boast about how much better and more cutting edge their computers are now that they're not using Intel's processors? I think they really want to do that. However, I think it's also impossible for Apple to roll out a brand new design for every single Mac model, which is why they said it'll be a 2-year process. I think it's going to take time. So my guess is that the new stuff we see in the fall will probably mostly be familiar. If they're doing a new 13-inch MacBook Pro, if they're doing a new MacBook Air, my guess is they're going to look pretty much like the existing models. The iMac, I'm open to the idea that maybe it'll be a radically new iMac because we could use one. The iMac design hasn't changed in a very long time. Its bezels are huge. It could stand to be redesigned. That would be pretty cool. I do completely believe that in a couple of years, almost every, if not every Mac is going to have a touch screen. It's going to have Face ID, and it's going to have a bunch of other features that we haven't even thought of yet. Cellular modems. I did an article on my website about it. I think there's a long list of features that exist only on the iPhone and the iPad that Apple is going to bring to the Mac now that it controls everything. And keeping in mind that Apple also bought Intel's 5G cellular modem business. Once Apple is building its own cellular modems, which it's not yet, I have a hard time believing that they won't put those in Apple laptops too, which would be the first time that that would happen on a Mac laptop. So in the long run, I think the Mac is going to look... Oh, I didn't even mention the biggest thing. The biggest thing about all of this is that the Macs that run Apple Silicon will run iPhone and iPad apps unmodified, aside next to your Mac apps, which is huge and blew me away when they announced it. And to me, that's the clincher that they're going to have touchscreens on the Mac, because just as the iPad is great as a touch device, but you can use a keyboard and a mouse, I think they're going to say the Mac is primarily a keyboard and mouse device, but also you can touch the screen, which would be very helpful if you've got an app that was designed for an iPhone and doesn't understand why things are so weird over here on this Mac. So I think there's going to be more of that. The Mac's going to be really different in a couple of years, and Big Sur is the start of it. So I think it's exciting because Apple really wants the Mac to be part of the bigger whole here. I think longtime Mac users, and I am one of them, there's trepidation because change is not fun and it's scary. But I'm really optimistic about the future of the Mac. And I say this because I feel like the Mac was headed for a place where it was going to be put off to the side. And it was going to be parked. And it was going to be like, well, you know, for legacy is a good word, legacy users, the Mac is available. And it's like for people who've been using the Mac a very long time, you got it, there it is. But for everybody else, it's very exciting. The iPad and the iPhone are over here. And I really do believe that that was their plan for a while. And a couple of years ago, I think it shifted. And if you think about where the Mac is going now, this is my pep talk part after how kind of scary Big Sur is. Think about where the Mac is going now. The Mac is the center of Apple's world now, because the Mac is the only device that Apple is going to make that runs everything. It runs everything your iPhone and your iPad run, and it's a Mac. So it runs all the Mac software. You can get to the terminal. You can do Automator. You can install software that you got off of the internet in a random place. Doesn't go through the App Store. Only the Mac can do all of those things. So the Mac becomes the superset of Apple's platforms. And the iPad and the iPhone are a subset of the Mac. Their software all runs on the Mac, plus the Mac runs Mac software. So I think in the end, the Mac is going to look really different, and it's going to feel more like an iPad in a lot of ways than it does now, and that's going to be strange. But I firmly believe that the Mac is still going to have a keyboard and a mouse. It's still going to have recognizable, even though if they're changed a little bit, laptops and iMacs. And it's going to be able to run all of this iPad and iPhone stuff. And I think that's going to bring in a lot of new Mac users who are comfortable with that. And I think it's going to mean that there are lots of holes in the Mac software lineup where we, as Mac users, get kicked to a web browser, oftentimes, a lousy web browser experience, where instead we're just going to be able to run the apps, because that lousy web browser experience is only for computers, and then everybody else on a phone or a tablet gets a neat app. We're going to get those apps now. So in the end, I think there's more to be excited about than be afraid of. But it's a big change, and I think that it's going to take us some time, and I would not be surprised if a lot of people say, I'm going to sit this out for the next year or two and see what happens, because the first couple of years of a transition can be kind of fraught. And that is everything in my outline. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments or anything else that anybody else has, and have a little bit of water.
What about the iPad hardware? Is there going to be an update?
Rumor is, so they just did the iPad Pro update, but like I said, it was really minor. It's literally the same chip. They called it the A12Z, but as far as anybody can tell, they designed the A12X in 2018 with these 8 graphics cores, but they couldn't get like the yields to work, so they shut off one of the cores. And now they've got it so that they can make those chips, and they actually have the 8 cores. So basically, the update was the LiDAR scanner and this chip update that wasn't an update. So the 2020 iPad Pro, super suspicious as like not an update. So all the rumors are, and I think this makes sense, that there is probably a substantial iPad Pro update coming in the spring of next year with the same chip that's powering the Apple Silicon Macs, probably. Probably not this fall, maybe, but probably not. And then all the other iPads seem to be updated on a kind of annual to 18-month cycle, and they seem to keep doing that. Apple seems to be really happy now of having a low-end iPad and having a kind of like mid-range iPad, and then the 2 iPad Pros at the top, and the iPad mini got a revision. Like, Apple seems to be in a really happy place where they like having a bunch of different iPads at different price points, at different sizes, with different capabilities, and they can point to the iPad Pro and say, isn't it awesome? But also have that base iPad that's super cheap. And so I think the iPad Pro is due for a big update, but they're going to keep it all churning, because I think they like how that's working for them.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Sure.
Did I understand you, the AirPods Pro, that'll be a software update?
Yeah, it's a software update. I'm unclear when and how, and I keep wondering if I update my if I attach my AirPods Pro to an iPhone running the beta, if it's going to get that update or not. And I'm unclear on when AirPods Pro attach to a device. One of the things they do is say, "Do you have a software update for me?" And they just, like, in the background, they update their software. It happens. So
well, that's relief. I just bought a pair last week.
Yeah. So there's, it's the way this is supposed to work is at some point they will just have surround sound, and that's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to that, and because I love my AirPods Pro. I was super skeptical because you can't really see it, but I have in-ear headphones here with like silicone inserts and stuff. It's like it noise cancels the old-fashioned way by like completely blocking your ears so you can't hear anything. And I was really skeptical of these of the AirPods Pro, and I love them. They're so good, and the noise canceling is so good, and I love the fact that you can turn it on and off, and also like have the sound channeled. And that's why I'm excited about that accessibility stuff, because the ability to tune that so that you can hear more clearly when that's turned on is also pretty exciting. But yeah, that's just a software update. It'll just happen.
All righty then.
Is the pointer support for the new iPad Pro dependent on having the Magic Keyboard with a trackpad? Or can it work with just the standard keyboard that comes with the Apple case?
So the pointer support is best with an Apple trackpad. Now, so I have a little stand for my iPad and a little external keyboard. It's a non-Apple keyboard. It's a little Bluetooth mechanical keyboard. And I have a Magic Trackpad. So the standard, been around for like 5 years, Magic Trackpad 2. It's great with that Magic Trackpad 2. Not the original Magic Trackpad is not as good, the one with the AA batteries, but the one that charges via Lightning, the Magic Trackpad 2, is perfect. It works so well. Third-party mice and keyboards, all the keyboards work fine. The third-party mice work okay. A lot of the iPad interface, it really does want you to swipe and do gestures, and so with a mouse, it's harder to do that. But I'll say with that with that Magic Trackpad 2. It's so good. Like it's fantastic. I like the Bridge makes a keyboard accessory for the iPad Pro that I've always really liked, and they've got a version that's got a trackpad, but the trackpad is not. It's a software thing. They're emulating a mouse when they need to be emulating basically the Magic Trackpad, and I hope they do a software update to fix that. But in the meantime, for me, like the perfect experience is with either that Magic Keyboard with the trackpad or just with an Apple Magic Trackpad, regular old Bluetooth, like the one I've got on my iMac right now, works so well with the pointer. But even like an $18 Bluetooth, like PC Bluetooth mouse works really well. Like it's very compatible, and you can map the buttons and stuff. Like it's pretty good. It's just you with a trackpad, you get the extra benefit of the swipes.
Jason, I
think he has Rick has the Logitech. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a Logitech keyboard and trackpad for my iPad Pro first generation, and I just love that thing. The trackpad works beautifully. It supports gestures, and the keyboard is terrific. It doesn't have any batteries or anything. It makes a connection by magnet with the iPad's 3 little connectors on the bottom, and it is just a dynamite thing. The downside is it weighs a ton.
Yeah, well, that is the challenge. I mean, the nice thing about the iPad is you can always disconnect it from the keyboard and whatever and walk away. So when it acts like a laptop, it's as heavy as a laptop. But the difference is, what I always say when people are like, well, why don't you just use a laptop then, is I can't tear the screen off my MacBook Pro and walk away, right? But I can do that with the iPad, and it's still perfectly usable, and I do that all the time. I'm not in keyboard and mouse mode on my iPad very often. I write every week in it, and I do spend time in it, but most of the time I pop it out of there, and I just got it as an iPad. I put in the chat, by the way, a link to the developer video I was talking about, which is designing for the iPad pointer. It's a fun watch. Honestly, it's not a super dry technical session. It is. I think it's fascinating to see how do you reinvent the cursor. And all of us have spent so much of our lives pushing that little arrow around our Mac screen. And so to see how they like reconceived that for the iPad, it's really good. So check it out.
Right. Where's our president?
I'm right here.
He's in the dark. I'm surprised that nobody has any questions about the Apple Silicon stuff. Are you trepidatious? Are you okay? It's going to be fine. I'm curious because really it's like the PowerPC transition, the OS X transition, the Intel transition, and here it is. This is like the 4th huge transition in the last 25 years for the Mac.
I was struck by you talking about the blank white windows. I'm totally into dark mode for everything. I'm so thrilled to not have blindingly bright gray windows, to have suddenly be faced with white ones. That sounds
well. I mean, good
horrible.
news. In dark mode, they'll be totally black windows, won't they?
Will they?
I think so. I think
Okay.
that's how that
Hopefully.
works. Although
Okay.
that actually, I've been writing about this, and you're absolutely right. I realized that I need to describe how they look in light mode and dark mode because they will be different. But yeah, I think that's the idea, is that they'll be perfectly white or they'll be perfectly black, but they're not going to be this kind of gray that's in the middle. They're going to be one or the other. It's striking how different they look, and they honestly having the titles off on the left is one of those things that as a longtime Mac user I'm like, whoa, what is happening? But yeah, they're not black. They're a very dark gray in dark mode because I just turned on dark mode on my test system here, and it's not perfectly black, but it's a very, very dark gray with everything else in reversed in white type.
Jason, I got a question about iOS on the iPad or even on the iPhone. Do you think it'll ever get multi-user? Like, can't you make another user? Like, you'll have to use somebody's iPad. I don't want to see your stuff. I want to have my stuff.
Yeah. I think there's no technical reason why they couldn't do that. My gut feeling is that what Apple would say is
get your own iPad.
Get your own iPad. Yeah, it's the when I was in college, I worked summers at a deli in a tourist town where I grew up, and up in Sonora, and I worked for these Hungarian couple, and the guy was just super cranky. And one of the things he said has stuck with me, which is people come in and try to order a half sandwich, and he'd say, there is no half sandwich. Order a whole sandwich. Eat half. And it's a little bit like that. It's like no multi-user support. Get another iPad. That's really what they want. And it's not necessary that it needs to be that way, but I think they figure like the mess of having to log you out and log you back in and do all of that is maybe more than they think that the iPad. It's definitely not a priority for them. They'd rather just sell you another iPad.
That sounds like Cafe Europa in Sonora.
So
open late. Get a good cup of Joe down there on Washington Street in Sonora. Good reference.
iPads being cheap, I do have a friend with a very tricked out Mac Pro, and I heard a rumor maybe it's going to get a card for Apple Silicon.
You mean like
plug in the
PCI card? PCI
for the
card
Mac
with
Pro.
like 20 ARM chips on it or something?
So I have not heard that as a rumor. I have definitely heard that as speculation of a thing Apple could do. And I think it's funny. They're in a funny position, right? They finally shipped that Mac Pro. And now they're doing a chip transition. And it's like all these people just spent all this money on a Mac Pro with an Intel processor in it.
They're not going to get a new machine.
And what's going to go? What's going to happen there? And also, what does the non-Intel Mac Pro look like? Which is maybe a different question. But yeah, I have had that thought, which is I think if Apple wanted to, that would be a way that they could say, look, the Mac Pro is still a great machine for developers even now because we're going to put a card with Apple Silicon in it, and we're going to let you maybe reboot into or run a virtual Mac inside it that is Apple Silicon for you to test things on. And you could see the sales point there, which is, well, yeah, it's a very expensive computer, but it's also literally the only Mac that will let you simultaneously do Intel and Apple Silicon. I think it's less likely that they're going to do that because there'll be a lot of engineering effort. And the fact is, Intel Macs are going to be fine for a long time. They're going to be fine. And you could still develop all your software on a Mac Pro and then just have a little Mac Mini around to deploy it on to make sure it works fine on Apple Silicon. So I think it's possible. I think it would be really cool if they did that. But I wouldn't put my own money down on that one.
So related to that, since the developers are getting the Mini, is a new Mini with Apple Silicon early in the timeline?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the one that the developers has got is that old iPad Pro chip. So I think it's not, but I think it's not what they would ship. But it also shows you that it's fairly easy to put Apple Silicon in a Mac Mini enclosure and ship it. Right? It's not a complicated computer. Although one of the reasons that I think they're waiting, and this is something that has been brought up a few times, and Apple actually made a statement about it the other week, which is Thunderbolt. Like the developer kit doesn't have Thunderbolt; it just has USB, and there's never been a Thunderbolt port on an iPad, right? It's been, and Intel is the original builders of Thunderbolt, but Apple has a license to Thunderbolt, and USB 4, which the first USB 4 stuff is supposed to ship this fall. USB 4 is Thunderbolt 4. They're the same, essentially. They use the same connector, which is USB-C connector. And so in theory, a lot of the confusion about like what's USB-C, what's Thunderbolt, and all that is just going to go away. It's like it's all the same now. It's all the same. And Apple Silicon would be the perfect time for Apple to roll that out. So the developer kit doesn't have Thunderbolt on it, but I would be shocked if the Apple Silicon Macs, whatever they call them, are going to be wouldn't have Thunderbolt. So I think that that's a way where they would what's in that Mac Mini enclosure now is not what they want to ship, but it also shows that it would be fairly easy to, because I don't think they're going to redesign the Mac Mini, right? Like the Mac Mini is just what it is for 8 more years or something. How often do they really update it on the outside? So I think that's what it'll be. Is I do think they'll turn that around fast. If not the beginning, if not the end of this year, beginning of next year, it'll happen fast. I think because it will be easy to do for them.
Jason, what do you think the timeline is for a really strong iMac in
Boy.
Apple Silicon?
The problem I have is that there's what I wish and there's what is probably reality. And I don't know. I think the big question is there an iMac redesign happening? Or like a redesign where it looks really different than the one that we have now? And what is that? And is that something that Apple's going to roll out like next week with Intel? Or is it something that they're going to roll out with Apple Silicon in the fall? Or is it something that they're going to not roll out with Apple Silicon? The first Apple Silicon iMacs are going to be boring. They're going to be just like the current iMacs. And then they'll rethink it later. Because I think there's got to be an iMac redesign coming. And I hope it's soon. I hope it's this fall. I hope that is their flagship. Like, look at what we can do now. In my dreams, not only do they reduce the bezels or make the screen bigger, and add a touch screen and add Face ID and have a much better webcam. In my dream, I would like them to go to a design that looks a little bit more like the G4 iMac, where there's a base and then there's a screen and they're attached. And that's because if you're going to do what I really want in an iMac is I want it to be able to work like the Surface Studio from Microsoft, which is I want it to be upright and be a computer, and I want to be able to pull it down and have it have Apple Pencil support and touch support and let people who are artists or using Photoshop or anything like that actually draw on the screen and all of those things, because I think that would be an amazing piece of hardware. But I think it's more likely that it'll be not quite as radical as that. But the iMac makes... I had an Apple person tell me when they shouldn't have that they're like, oh, did I tell you, did I say that number out loud? That the iMac's like $1 billion business for Apple. It's a huge, huge business. Just because most of the laptops that Apple sells, or most of the Macs Apple sells are laptops, do not discount how important the iMac is to Apple. It's a super successful product, and its design is super old. So I think the right thing to do is a strong new iMac this fall or next spring. I hope it's this fall, but that's just speculation.
I was thinking in terms of the processor.
Oh yeah, no, look.
They're going to get Apple Silicon that's competes with what's available until now.
The 2018 iPad Pro which is what the developer transition kit essentially is just to put this in perspective, that's an 8-core, no, it's a 6-core, 6 CPU and 8 GPU core system, or 7 or 8, depending. So the old processor that was never meant for a Mac is a 6-core. There's still the only 6-core laptop you can get is the 16-inch, I think. And so the idea Apple's going to be able, that iMac, you could have the iMac and it's going to have like 8, 10, 12 processor core plus. I don't think power is going to be a problem for Apple Silicon. I really don't. I think that they are going to be able to, well, I don't think they do it. Honestly, I don't think they do it. Follow me here. Apple's a proud company. I don't think Apple would put out computers with their processors in them if they had to apologize for their processors, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they'd do it if they had to apologize that the iMac got slower. I just don't think they would do it. So the fact that they're doing it suggests to me that they know very well that those iMacs are going to be way faster than the current iMacs are, because they can do, and the core thing I bring up because that's a great example where, like, we don't even talk about how many cores are in an iPhone or an iPad, and we talk about it, and that's because of the context, and Apple doesn't like to talk about it. But like in a pure computer context, that's why the iPad Pro is faster than almost every PC laptop to this day. The 2018 iPad Pro is because it's got power efficiency cores, and it's got super high powered cores, and it can run them all, and bypass or dispatches to the different cores at different times, so it can be super power efficient, but it can also go really fast when it needs to. And that's all coming to the Mac. So there's I think the potential is huge, and I think Apple doesn't want to be embarrassed, so they're going to put their best foot forward. I think it's not going to be. I honestly don't think it's going to be an issue. I think they're going to. I suspect they're going to put Intel to shame a little bit, and also don't forget that right now Apple has to buy those Intel chips and then embed that price into the price of their computer. And what I don't think they're going to do is cut the prices of their computers, but I do think perhaps they will splurge a little bit on what those chips can do in order to make sure that they can beat Intel.
Jason, do you think we're going to get a better webcam anytime? These 720p built-in cameras they're an embarrassment.
I think yes. I think when they redesign these systems, they are going to make them better, and that's part of what I said about Face ID too. I feel like that now is the time to put Face ID on the Mac. Windows has had Windows Hello for a long time now, and I know it's not as good and it's not the same and yada yada yada, but Apple's behind on that. And I have to think that the redesign, as they redesign their laptop hardware and they redesign the iMac, they're going to make sure that there's room for that sensor bar in there that'll let you have a good camera and let you do Face ID on, because you can't really do Touch ID on an iMac or a Mac Mini, but you can do it on an external display with a camera, which I hope they also do. And on an iMac, it's super easy. You just do Face ID instead of Touch ID. So I feel like the answer to a lot of places where we look at the Mac and we're like, wow, why is that so bad? Am I wishing? Am I hoping? Yes, but I do think there's probably some truth to the fact that Apple looked at that and said, let's wait on that. We got a thing we're going to do.
Do the whole package.
And then we'll do it all like we can't get a good one to fit into this iMac, but the next iMac's going to have it. So that's what I'm hoping, because yeah, the webcams are terrible. Like I've got an iMac Pro, and it's actually got like a 1080 webcam. It's I think the best Mac webcam that they make, and it's not great, but it's okay.
How much of your work at this point are you doing on your iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard instead of a Mac?
So I haven't used a Mac laptop I've touched them. I've got one right here, but for my work in a long time, for travel or in the house or in the backyard or whatever, I just use an iPad Pro. When I'm at my desk, I'm on my iMac. So I'd still say I'm probably working 80, 90% of the time on my iMac, but I do a lot of writing on the iPad. When I do writing on the iPad this time of year in the summer, it's usually with the Magic Keyboard, because I like to go into the backyard on a nice day and sit out there under the redwood tree and write. In the winter, I'll pop it on my little stand and stand in my kitchen, and write there with a trackpad too. So I'd say it's probably pretty equivalent to if you had an iMac and a laptop, how often you use the laptop. Except for me, it's the iPad instead. So a lot. I use the iPad a lot, but when I'm working on the iPad, it's generally, it's when I'm writing something, especially, it's a nice break. If I'm actively focusing on writing a piece, I will take the iPad and I'll go do that somewhere else. And it's nice to have. I used to do it with the Bridge keyboard, or I do it with the Smart keyboard, and now I use the Magic keyboard.
All righty.
I've got a question. I thought I remembered when the other day that when Rick was giving his preview of what was going to be on Big Sur, he said something about how the Apple Mail app was going to be rewritten from the ground up and have a toolbar, et cetera, which might take care of some of the reasons that Apple Mail was getting denigrated there earlier on. Do you know anything about that?
Well, as I admitted before, I don't use Apple Mail, and I have to admit that I haven't even run it on Big Sur yet to say, but it didn't get rewritten from the ground up. It's still Apple Mail. I'm a little surprised that it hasn't gotten rewritten from the ground up, honestly, because it's a very old piece of software at this point, but it's still kicking. So I don't think it's dramatically different. I think they did do that, the visual redesign, right, where the windows look very different and the sidebars look different and all of that. But I still think it's pretty much Apple Mail.
Same old, huh? Thanks anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the Catalyst ones. It's still the Mac app that's been around for 20 plus years, 25-ish. Because it was Nextmail, it's actually like basically Steve Jobs' next email client that he had them make again for the Mac.
Does the Apple Car exist in development somewhere? Is there any hints, whispers about that?
Sounds like no. It sounds like they thought they were going to build a car and then they decided not to build a car. And now they're working on some autonomous vehicle tech and stuff that I think that they like the idea of like where that might lead them, whether or not they ever built a car. But the idea that they were actually going to build their own car seems to have come and gone, and they laid off a bunch of people that were part of that project. And while there's still some automotive related project around, nobody is saying that it's going to happen anytime soon, and that they're actually, it seems like they decided, I think Tim Cook maybe looked at the bills and said, maybe let's not do this. I also suspect that maybe that was one of those things where one of the Apple's challenges is that so many people have been at Apple a long time and have stock options and have made enormous amounts of money and don't need to work anymore. And sometimes I think that they keep people around by inducing them. This is always the challenge, right? It's somebody you want to keep around, but they don't want to do the job you need them to do. And so do you let them go and then you lose this incredibly valuable person, or do you keep them but have them do something you don't actually want to do? And this is my long way of saying I think Johnny Ive, for example, and probably some other people were kind of induced to stick around because the car seemed intriguing, but it was a bad idea for Apple at the time, and that at some point they just decided to walk away.
We haven't heard much about Johnny Ive lately.
He's got all the money. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, I'm sure
he said he was going to have his own company. He was going to do some projects for Apple still.
Well,
I'm not going away. It's like zip.
I would probably lay money that he's never going to do another project for Apple, but whatever. He contributed a lot to the company, and I think he deserves whatever he wants to do next. If he wants to amuse himself doing jobs, or if he just wants to retire and
about doing
buy cars.
Not for Apple, anything at all. It's like he dropped off the face of the earth.
Well, let's be clear. He doesn't need to do anything ever again. And he may not. And if he does, my guess is it's going to be something that most of us regular people roll our eyes at, because it's going to be like, we made 10 of these solid gold whatevers that are each cost $4 million, and no one will ever buy them, and no one will ever actually see them. And isn't it art? And everybody will applaud. And I think it'll be stuff like that. And I would love Johnny Ive to become the next like OXO designer and create the next great, measuring cup for me to use in my kitchen. But somehow I don't think that's going to happen.
Is Apple's supply chain getting affected by COVID?
I'm sure it is. A lot of manufacturing has gone back into service, and there's a debate to be had about whether it's actually safe or whether the workers are being put in danger. And it depends on where. Apple's supply chain is all over the place. The assembly stuff in China, China is doing pretty well. Honestly, right now, the places that I'd be worried about are like Corning, which is in Kentucky, I think. Like there are hotspots in the U.S., right? The U.S. is doing badly at COVID-19 right now, and U.S. does source, a lot of the parts for Apple stuff. It does come from the U.S. It's not made. It's assembled in China, but a lot of it is made all over the world, including in the U.S. So the challenge with that is that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and that's when I say I don't know when the iPhones are going to ship. I think that's the challenge, right? Is what if one supplier that Apple relies on has to shut down because they have an outbreak in their factory for whatever part that Apple relies on. And so, it sounds like the assembly plants in China are doing fine. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some aspect, some weak link somewhere in the supply chain that we don't even know about. So I think 2020 has taught all of us not to expect the unexpected. Let's put it that way. That maybe the usual patterns won't necessarily hold, and don't count on it being that way. So I'm sure Apple's doing everything it can to hedge against that, because it really does want to ship iPhones and behave as normally and get Apple Silicon Macs out there and all of that. But I think they also are aware that the best laid plans in 2020 may not come to fruition.
China. Yesterday, the president declared economic war on China. And Britain has done it, and we've done it. What's that going to do to anything you're mentioning just now about the assembling and shipping?
We're so economically intertwined with China that it's a challenge in the short term. You do see places like Apple's chips are made by Taiwan Semiconductor, and TSMC is actually going to build plants in the U.S. now. They're going to build a plant in Arizona. That's an interesting thing because Taiwan is not China. They are, and China says they are China, and they're right there, and that's a real vulnerability. Plus, then there's everything that's actually in China. And the truth is, high-tech supply chains go through China right now, and there's kind of nothing we can do about it. And the good thing about that is, they need us as much as we need them. It's not right to view it as, oh boy, China's got us where they want us because our supply chain runs through China. Because the reverse is true, is if the supply chain turns off, China loses huge amounts of money, and their workers are unemployed, and that's bad. And if you're running a communist party in China, that's kind of bad to have a lot of unrest in your country. You have to deal with that because you're running you're managing an authoritarian state, and you kind of don't want to have uprisings among the workers because that could be bad for you. So there's a codependency that happens there. But I would say if I was Tim Cook, and I'm sure first off, Tim Cook is the best person in the world when it comes to supply chain logistics. He's literally, that was what he excelled at, and that's why he's the CEO of Apple. I would be shocked if Apple is not spending some of their billions and billions and billions, $100 billion in cash, placing a whole lot of bets about fallback positions involving China needing to get parts or all of your business out of China. So I would imagine that they're investing not just in the US, but they're investing in Taiwan, they're investing in Korea. I would imagine they're investing, you hear a lot about them investing in Vietnam. And then they also have experimented with some assembly in Brazil and in India, which is mostly for in Brazil and India. But I would imagine that this doesn't get reported a lot, and it's behind the scenes. But I think Tim Cook would actually be derelict at his duties if he wasn't keeping, having a fallback strategy in case the U.S.-China relationship continues to be bad. At the same time, I would argue that Tim Cook is one of the U.S.'s, or a great go-between between the U.S. and China, and he's a champion of the countries working together and mutually benefiting from one another. And much has been made in the Apple blog sphere over the last couple of days, especially by John Gruber, about how embarrassing it is to see Tim Cook participate in various economic things done by the Trump administration. I firmly believe that Tim Cook feels like his best position is talking to the people in the government so that they get a reasoned response about the importance of China beyond the saber rattling, and having Apple be there. Apple's like one of America's most valuable and important companies, and having the CEO whisper to the executive branch that this is how this works in China, and why we can't go to a trade war with China right now is a place he needs to be. So, I think the New York Times called him our unofficial ambassador to China, and I'm not sure that's true. I think it's more like the sovereign state of Apple is a go-between between China and the United States government. But I do think that he's trying to steer the conversation there and influence as much as he can what the policies are. But who knows? And then there's a presidential election, and there may be a new administration, and who knows how that'll change the relationship too. But yeah, if I was Tim Cook, I think it's like disaster planning. I think you literally would be derelict of your duty if you weren't thinking, how do we have a fallback plan if China is not going to work for us? Because what have we learned about Apple, if not that Apple hates having anything that they can't control? where they are relying on somebody else. Whether it's Intel or IBM and the PowerPC and the G5, or or the Qualcomm thing with the cellular modems and the iPhone. Like, Apple wants to control everything that's key to its business. What is more key than its manufacturing chain? And right now they are dependent on their relationship with China. So I gotta believe that they're working on it. Like, just not to leave China as much as make sure that they've got a hedge against it.
Thank you.
Are you writing any books now?
I've got to update. I've got a book that Take Control puts out about photos for it's for all platforms. It used to be for the Mac, but now it's for Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Which is, I mean, the photos in iPad OS 14 and Big Sur, they're even more identical on iPad and Mac than ever before, because now there's a sidebar and all that. So I'm working on that. I am doing a course on podcasting that is probably not going to be out until the fall, about like how to edit and record and edit podcasts. So I'm working on that, but that's not a book. That's going to be like a video course, because it's so complicated that I kind of need to show and play audio and stuff. And then my other big project is not a book, although it might become a book at some point. I'm working on a long-term project that I'm hoping to launch in August, which people who are fans of Mac history should enjoy. That involves writing and also a podcast and also a video series. I have not announced it. You know more than anyone I've ever told about that. So watch for that in August, and it should be fun because it'll have some nostalgia plus some current events in it. So those are my big projects that I'm doing.
Do you have a working title for that yet? That you
I
want to
do.
share?
I'm not gonna share it because it'll give everything away. But but I'm working on that. So those are my big projects right now. Plus, it's the summer with the betas and all that. So like, I want to work on my long-term projects in addition to writing stories, every week. And then I have to, I'm writing my first look at the public beta for whenever the public beta happens for Big Sur. And so, days like today, I look at 6 Colors and I think I haven't posted anything. I posted something today, but I didn't post anything yesterday. And it's like, yeah, but I wrote like 3,000 words yesterday about Big Sur, but you won't see that until whenever the public beta comes out. So hopefully in a week or two. Yeah, so summer's very busy, but I'm working on I'm going to do a photos book update and a podcast thing. And then this other project, which should be a lot of fun, just like entertainment value. And it's going to make people really angry at me in a good way, where there'll be a conversation, hopefully, that happens about people disagreeing with me, because I'm going to have opinions. I'm going to rank things. How about that? I'll give you a little clue. I'm going to rank things, and then everybody will disagree with my rankings, and that's fine. That's good.
Cool. All righty. Any other questions? We all good?
Thank you, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but 2020.
We missed taking you out to dinner.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
It was great.
You did a great job. Very thorough.
Well, I hope to see you all next year sometime in person. That would be nice.
We hope so too.
Yeah, we're counting on
it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
it.
Thanks.
Wave 5 for the recording. All righty.
I think that was a very good meeting. He is certainly thorough. And,
oh, yeah.